What's up, YouTube? This is the Roman Atheist, Romanist Atheist here, and this is my weekly LGBTQ plus video. This will be coming out on Friday. I'm doing a lot of pre-recording just as a heads up. That's why there's a bunch of PragerU videos that I've been releasing. But this video isn't by PragerU. This is by someone else. I'm blanking on his name currently, but it's about why Pride sucks. And he talks about other groups, but I'm going to mainly focus on LGBTQ+, because those are communities that I'm a part of.
Last month, all across the world, parades and festivities were held in honor of LGBT Pride Month. Pride Month is designed to give LGBT people a month for them, where they can celebrate their sexuality.
Alright, so he says that Pride is celebrating one's sexuality, which it is in some ways, but I don't think that's the main point of Pride. I believe / understand that Pride is more of a celebration of what we as a community have overcome with discrimination and that kind of stuff, which is why Pride at least is important and I feel is needed. But let's let him continue.
Before we really get started, I have to clarify. The title of this video has pride in quotation marks because I'm referring to this phenomenon where certain groups get months, days, or other special privileges assigned to them. The pride in the title isn't referring to the literal concept of being proud of who you are. Ultimately, I think everyone should be proud to a degree. It's completely okay to be proud of your heritage, your sexuality, your accomplishments, and everything that makes you who you are.
So far, he hasn't said too much that is overly, I guess, upsetting or incorrect, but he will, so let's let him get into that.
What I just said, that it's okay to be proud of your heritage, etc., that doesn't sound that controversial, does it? It sounds like something you would see in a public school on a poster, or something a corporate HR office would release in a diversity statement. But the truth is that right now in America, various groups are not allowed to express pride in the various identities they have. Let's look at Black Pride, for example.
So, a quick disclaimer, I am not Black, African American, whatever title you want to give. I really don't know what's the correct way to phrase it, so when / if I speak on these type of things when it talks about other communities other than the LGBT that I'm not a part of, that's just my understanding, and really, and even with the LGBT community, it's more based on my understanding and has less to do with, I'm trying to think of the right word here, less to do with, it's like my projection of what I think might be the case, but I don't know for sure, and feel free if you are members of those communities to correct me on that kind of thing.
Go ahead and type Black Pride into Google. This is probably what you'll come up with. Quote, Black Pride is a movement in response to the dominant white cultures and ideologies that encourages black people to celebrate black culture and embrace their African heritage. In the US, it was a direct response to white racism, especially during the civil rights movement.
So far, there's nothing wrong with that statement. I mean, he's reading it off of Google, so I don't know if that's what he believes. But where I have a feeling he's going to go with this is he's going to say stuff about why don't we have white pride? Why don't we have straight pride? Why don't we have family values pride? Why don't we have other, traditional pride, or what, traditionalism pride, or whatever he's going to call it. But let's let him continue and go into that. We're already 4 minutes in.
Black people in America are encouraged to get in touch with their African heritage. February is designated as Black History Month, and that's seen as a good, positive thing, and I think it is.
Well, it's good that you think that that's good, because there's a lot of people who don't.
What about Hispanic Pride? Every September and October we celebrate Hispanic Heritage Month. We have the Hispanic Heritage Foundation. Organizations like MECHA, which call for Hispanic separatism and actually call for the Hispanic recolonization of the southwestern United States, these organizations are present on hundreds of college campuses across the US, and they're celebrated by faculty.
Well, I don't doubt that those groups exist. I don't know if those are necessarily groups that are celebrated. Like, the heritage stuff I get. I mean, like, the recolonization and separatist stuff. I don't know if that's a celebrated thing on college campuses, because that runs into similar problems as being proud of the Confederacy because they separated from the Union. But I don't know, that seems like a little bit of a straw man. I've never heard of those groups, but let's let him continue.
So Hispanic pride is completely fine. It's celebrated. And again, that's an okay thing. But what about European Americans? People of European descent?
We have reached the whataboutism that will theme probably the rest of this video. What about European, and why can't Europeans have pride and where they come from? Well, I think they can. I just don't think they need a month because Europeans are the one in power and they never had to overcome something like Hispanics or blacks or African Americans or whatever other groups you can bring, or like the LGBT community. Being white has never been something oppressed in this country, which is why it doesn't need a pride. I should probably clarify a pride month, not a or a pride day or any of those. You like I said, you can have pride, you just don't need a pride. You don't need a specific day or month for pride because it's generally the general life is related to that. But let's let him get into it and have more of his whataboutisms.
The vast majority of the people that sailed across the seas and colonized a hostile land and comprised 90% of America's population until approximately the 1960s. The truth is that Europeans throughout history have accomplished some pretty great things.
Yes, but did all those great things that Europeans create and do, were they doing that in spite of the challenges they faced by the outside world and community against them for being white? That's, I guess, the question, and why pride is like pride days and pride months are for some groups that have historically been oppressed and are not for groups that haven't. That's why there's these things, is that all these achievements that you're going to list off, they didn't occur while whites were being oppressed in this country or in other countries, Europeans, where many pride things that the LGBT community has done, the Hispanic community, the black community, many of their achievements happened while there was some oppression going on, which is why there's pride for that, because they were able to achieve these things while there's immense pressure stopping them from doing so. I'm 7 minutes in and his video is 6 minutes long. Let's let him continue.
All you need to do is look at the architecture, civilizations, and empires built back in Europe to see proof of that. Yet, and remember how we just typed black pride into Google and got a positive result? Type the phrase white pride into Google and see what you come up with. Here's what I got. Quote, "White pride is a motto primarily used by white separatist, white nationalist, neo-Nazi, and white supremacist organizations in order to signal racist or racialist viewpoints." So wait, black and Hispanic pride make you noble and good and proud, but white pride makes you a neo-Nazi?
So this is where I'm going to get a little bit more frustrated when he tries to create a narrative of white pride as being seen as something only neo-Nazis and the alt-right does. From my view, white pride is something more expressed from the right as like a reaction to these other. It's like a counterculture movement, but not in a good. Is there a good counterculture? I don't know. It's a movement that uses pride of being white as a reason to oppress other people, which is why it's bad. Being proud of being white by itself isn't inherently wrong. It's when you use it to oppress other people that it becomes dangerous. But let's let him continue and create this oppression narrative or whatever he's going for, Mr. Fun Hair.
If every person were really allowed to express pride in who they are, this double standard would not exist. You would be allowed to express your pride in your Asian or African or Hispanic or, yes, European heritage without risk being called a neo-Nazi.
he's still missing the point of pride. I mean, it's not like he's reacting or responding to my video, but he's misunderstanding what pride is to the point where it's not even communication this way doesn't work very well, but I'm going to keep trying, so I'll let him get into it.
This is why I can't stand this pride phenomenon, because only certain groups are really allowed to have pride.
Every group is allowed to have pride. Certain groups don't need a month because the month is there for representing the difficulties that the groups that have those months had to overcome in being able to have pride in who they are. That's why there's those months. White people never had to overcome any issues to be proud of who they are, where LGBTQ plus, the black community, Hispanics, Asians, whatever other group, there was at least in this country, there's always been a history of oppression in that way.
And whether or not you're allowed to have pride is determined by your place on the victimhood hierarchy.
Maybe having a month or a day of being pride is where you are on the victimhood hierarchy, but it's less victimhood hierarchy and the oppression you had to face by a result of the culture and the government. It's never been illegal in this country to be straight. You were never forced to give up your seat on a bus for being white. That is why there are these months for groups that have historically been oppressed, and aren't months for people who haven't historically been oppressed. I don't know this guy's sexuality, but he doesn't need a month for being white because the white people have never been oppressed in this country historically.
A white man will never be allowed to express pride in his European heritage.
Well, you can always express pride in your heritage. You just don't need a month for it. There's months for groups that are historically been oppressed. You might be ridiculed for it, but that doesn't stop you. You have your First Amendment right to freedom of speech. You're more than welcome to have your ability to be proud in where your ancestors came from. But your ancestors weren't oppressed weren't oppressed, so you don't really need a month, at least in the United States. Other places, I don't know where your family's entire history, but in the United States, they haven't been oppressed. Later editing note, I'd like to clarify they haven't been oppressed for being white. I don't know his entire family history. He might be of Irish heritage, and then they were oppressed for being Catholic or whatever you want to dig into. I'd like to clarify for being white. My apologies if I wasn't clear before, but let's let him go.
But a gay white man will be allowed to express pride in his LGBT-ness.
Again, that white man can express pride in being white, and in fact probably will at some point, but LGBT-ness is where you get a month because you are historically oppressed.
Likewise, a straight Asian man will never be allowed to express pride in the fact that he plans on getting married and having a family and literally continuing the human species. By the way, getting married and having a family is absolutely something you should be allowed to be proud about.
Correct. But say it with me. Married people have never been oppressed for being married, nor have straight people been oppressed for being straight. It's never been illegal in this country to be straight. Let's let him get into it.
But this straight Asian man will be allowed to express pride in the fact that he's of Asian descent, not in the fact that he's putting his career and finances on hold to have a family.
He's really hammering in this family thing. Does he think that LGBTQ plus people can't have a family? Because he'd be wrong if he's thinking that. I don't know what he's thinking. That's just what sounds like he's saying.
Look, I have nothing against gay people or anything like that, but I think we as a society really need to evaluate this pride movement. It's totally fine, and in fact, it's good to be proud of who you are. And if you value your sexuality as essential to your identity, of course you should be proud of it.
Alright, so this will probably be the last time I'm going to directly say this in this video because I've said it several times now. The LGBT community celebrates Pride for the accomplishments they have and the overcoming of oppression that they have received, not their pride in being gay or who they're attracted to. That is something people in the LGBT community are proud about, but that's not what Pride is about. But let's let him get into it and finish up his statements.
We should also be okay with family pride, traditional values pride, heterosexual pride. The family is the bedrock of Western civilization, and instead of taking that for granted, we should celebrate it. Some people will argue that neither heterosexuals nor European Americans should be expressing pride in those things because straight people and white people are not oppressed classes.
What I'm saying is not that you can't express pride in those things, it's that you don't need a day or a month or a week or whatever you're going for, because those groups that you just referred to haven't been historically oppressed. You can celebrate your being heterosexualness or being white all you want, and I really won't blink an eye, but you don't need a day or a month or a week for it because you weren't oppressed. You can kind of celebrate it whenever and no one will blink an eye unless you say some super racist stuff along with those statements, or super homophobic stuff along with that stuff, or super non-traditional family stuff. I don't know what you're going for with that. That might just also be homophobic or whatever you're talking about, I don't know why he put in traditional family stuff there, but he did, so let's let him ask his question, and then I'll answer it.
I would counter that with a question. How many corporate and government entities express their admiration and joy and celebration for Pride Month? Quite a few. Google, Apple, Facebook, Nike, and hundreds of other companies express their support publicly for Pride Month. City governments, politicians, even police departments were all getting in on this act. How can we seriously claim there's some sort of rampant anti-LGBT bias in society when all of the power brokers of society are coalescing in support of Pride Month?
Okay, here is what I'm saying. Current rampant oppression of the LGBT community. That is not as common currently in this specific country as it was in the past. But pride is not about overcoming oppression in the here and now. That's part of it, but that's not what it's about. It's being proud of what has been overcome, showing to people in the LGBT community and other places who are being oppressed that there's hope. That's a big one. And then, pointing out that there are still some issues, like the majority of states in our country, just as an example, don't have anti-discrimination laws to anyone in the LGBTQ plus community. I know of 4 off the top of my head. There might be more that have laws against it. But let's let him finish up his statements, and I'm going to make a counter argument, like just a real quick, nice, easy one.
And when we talk about European heritage, some people will say that because Europe is made up of so many different countries and cultures, it's impossible to accurately celebrate European heritage.
I'm sorry, I said I'd let him finish, but then he said this. So that's an easy one to refute. No one is actually saying that. That is a straw man argument. If someone is saying that, show me a quote, give me a source, anything. I don't know of a single person who says that. And if they would, I would agree that is a little hypocritical, but show someone who actually says that, and I might actually take your side on this specific point. But right now, you're just strawmanning, because saying some people doesn't mean anything.
This argument is extremely easy to refute. Is there only one culture or country in Africa? Is there only one Hispanic country or culture? No, of course not. Within broader groups, of course there are differences between histories and cultures. But the differences between people from Sudan and the Congo, for example, that doesn't stop us from celebrating Black History Month. Again, I'll reiterate. I think the idea of having pride in yourself is a great and probably psychologically healthy thing. I'm ecstatic that LGBT Americans can celebrate their sexuality. I'm excited that Black Americans can celebrate Black history. But if you're straight and you plan on having children, you should absolutely be allowed to have pride in that too. Humanity literally ends if we don't have children.
So there is an entire month for Veterans Appreciation. I believe it's May. But I can use the arguments that he's been using for all of this. Since there is a Veteran Appreciation Month, shouldn't we have a Citizens Appreciation Month for all the great things that citizens have done? Because I agree, veterans should have the right to be proud of them being veterans, but shouldn't citizens have the right to be proud of being citizens and not have joining the military? Sounds absurd when I put it like that, right? So maybe your arguments that you're using aren't necessarily the best. Now, veterans haven't exactly been oppressed, but they're a minority group in our country and are and haven't exactly been treated the best by politics. I have a lot of family members who are veterans, and all I hear about them is complaining about the VA and how trashy it is. But what I'm getting at with what I'm saying here is the statements that he is making, even if you remove all oppression from it, still doesn't make any sense. Because, oh, veterans have a month because they're a minority and they have done some great things and overcome adversity. Oh, but civilians have done great things. So why don't we have months just for being proud of being a civilian? It's easy to that's an easy thing to refute, and I don't think anyone is arguing that we should have a civilian month, but you can use the same logic he's using now towards that. But let's let him finish up like the last 2 minutes or so of his video.
And at the same time, I think European Americans should be able to be proud of our histories too. There's nothing wrong with being proud of who you are.
Yep, but Europeans don't need a month where the African community has overcome stuff, which gives them which is why they've been awarded a month, I guess, is maybe what I don't know, that sounds condescending. Anyway, let's let them.
Europeans have built, without question, some of the most impressive empires in world history. Europeans have been innovators, conquerors, inventors, and kings. And if you want to celebrate that, no one should be able to stop you.
Now, actually, I do find celebrating being a conqueror is not exactly the best thing to be proud of and doesn't help your case for white nationalism, because conquering isn't exactly a good thing. You can attempt to contradict me on that, but conquering in the way that colonization went down is absolutely abhorrent and horrific and should be kinda not celebrated, just as a thought. Now let me clarify, you can celebrate that, but in this case, you shouldn't be surprised when people refute or tell you all the bad things that happened under those magnificent empires or under all those conquests that you're so proud of, or what those kings did to people. Those are just things you might need to think about when you say those kind of things, because those things aren't necessarily good. Architecture, that's a very interesting and something you can be proud of, but empires and kings and conquerors, those are not as easily justifiable.
For years, Europeans and European Americans have been apologizing, groveling, and feeling guilt over supposed historical sins of our race. We've been so convinced by the Marxist school system and
Marxist school system. That sounds like a conspiracy theory to me, and just made me realize that this guy's a little bit more special than I originally thought when it comes to being reasonable. If you think that the school system is Marxist or whatever you're going for, that's a little interesting. and he's going to talk about celebrities, but I'll let him finish. I'll just let him run out his last like 30 seconds or whatever he's got.
Hollywood propaganda that being white is something to be ashamed about. But not anymore. The time for shame and the time for guilt is over. We've been convinced by the Marxist school system and Hollywood propaganda that being of European heritage is something to be ashamed of. But not anymore. The time for shame and guilt is over. It's time for everyone to have equal access to pride. It's time to not be afraid of being proud of yourself and your heritage. And it's time to start thinking about creating a legacy that you can be proud of.
Okay, so that last little bit is a little interesting. It gives me some conspiracy conspiracy vibes, I guess is what I'm going for, or going to say. I don't really get why he's blaming Hollywood propaganda and Marxist school system, whatever that means. I don't see how a school system can be Marxist without the government being Marxist. I guess it just kind of shows the misunderstanding of how American culture seems to work. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed my rebuttal. This is going to be like a 20. My videos are getting very long recently. I've been used to try to keep them at 10, but this is like the fourth video in a row that has gone over 25 minutes. But I'm going to end it off here. Hope you guys enjoyed. Sorry for this being my normal format, not just a rant about LGBT stuff. But I figured I didn't want to be straw manning anyone, so I put in a video here. So, see you guys later.